If it goes right, it's a slice. If it goes left, it's a hook. If it goes straight, it's a miracle. This is Out of Bounds. If it's happening in the world of golf, we're talking about it. Coverage, debate, discussion, pro golf and local golf. Let's do it. This is Out of Bounds. And here are your hosts, Nate Sharman and Josh Durso.
All right, welcome to Out of Bounds. Josh Durso and Nate Sharman here getting you ready for the US Open. What an incredible week last weekend was, though. The RBC Canadian Open might not have been an elevated event, Nate, but holy cow, it felt like one.
That was just unbelievable. Nick Taylor knocks in a 70-foot eagle putt on the fourth playoff hole on number 18 to take down Tommy Fleetwood in a playoff. Taylor wins his third career PGA Tour victory, becomes one of, I believe it's 6 Canadian players all time to have 3 victories or more on the PGA Tour, which is pretty cool. So jumps into the ranks in terms of Canada. But what's just so cool about it is the national aspect, right, Josh? You know, you had so many Canadian fans there throughout the golf course. They had the number 14th hole set up as a rink, kind of the look at the hockey, right? Fans banging on the glass, singing the Canadian national anthem. So all that fun stuff was really cool. You know, it's the only tournament that's played in Canada every single year. The course kind of bounces around every so often, and then it just hasn't been won by a Canadian, right? It's been 69 years since a Canadian's won this event. Nick Taylor puts himself in the record book in Canada with that victory. So really cool for Taylor to win that tournament. Adam Hadwin, another Canadian, runs on the green afterwards, right? Starts playing with champagne. A security guard promptly tackles him to the ground, which was pretty funny video to watch afterward. And in typical Canadian fashion, right, Josh, Adam Hadwin apologized to the security guard after, which is just
unreal.
Typical Canadian, right? A little bit of sorry there. So pretty cool to see, but it just really begs the question of, should we have more national events, Josh? This just seems like a no-brainer in my mind.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Another interesting thing, too, that everybody kept pointing to like that 69 or 70 year mark since someone from Canada had last won this event. You have to actually go back almost 100 years, I believe, to get the last person born in Canada to have won the RBC. So just an incredible weekend. And like, look, we talked about this Sunday night, and then we talked about it again Monday morning. You know, the tour needs to lean into this, right? Like these national events are a huge opportunity to grow the game, to globalize the game. And especially given what we clearly have now playing out with the merger, the coming together of global golf and making it more of a one complete entity. You know, a few places come to mind. Obviously, Australia, Live, had great experience there this year, according to everybody who really watched it closely. The RBC in Canada, huge, awesome event. A few other countries I think of,
Mexico's been good, yeah.
Huge. It's a big one. Dubai to kind of get the Middle East into the mix.
Japan,
Korea, Japan, or just a couple of others that come to mind that I think would be really awesome to just lean into more that globalization of golf, because golf is such a global game already as it is. Yes. Players from literally all over the world. And of course, I think if you were going to do this, you'd probably have to also incorporate some European national events into this as well. But just something that I think would be really awesome. Just imagine if in addition to these elevated events, or perhaps they'd be incorporated directly into the elevated schedule and majors, that we also had a series of, 5, 6, or 7, basically like national opens.
Right. No, I agree totally.
All over the world. It would be incredible. It would be absolutely incredible. And maybe it would be something that could be integrated into the fall portion of the schedule, which has now just become this annual tradition of change, to kind of rebuild, set things up for the following year. I don't know. It'd be interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely a no-brainer in my mind, Josh, especially now with golf being more globalized, right? In terms of the Saudis getting involved in professional golf and the PGA Tour, with the two tours merging together. I think that's definitely something we'll see. Some more heightened approaches to, maybe the already existing events like Canadian Open and the Open over in Britain to the British Open. So yep. I think you'll just, like we said, Japan comes to mind. There's a few other countries. Australia was wildly successful for the Live event just a few months ago. We talked about that extensively on here. So I think that's just a complete no-brainer and something they'll definitely do, because nationalism is huge and these fans really get behind their respective people. You know, the Canadians really getting behind Nick Taylor, Adam Hadwin, Roger Sloan, a few others to name. And for Tommy Fleetwood as well in the playoff, you saw some of the guys from Team Europe come out onto the 18th green. Tyrrell Hatton, Justin Rose, just to name a couple, were out there supporting their Englishmen. And it was really cool because it's a really bad environment for an Englishman, right? Especially over there in Canada. You know, they were really rooting for their guy, but it's really cool to see Tommy Fleetwood kind of having the back, you know, guys of Tyrrell Hatton and Justin Rose kind of there supporting too. So it goes both ways in that regard. It's not only good for the country it's in, it's good for other countries as well. And
to give the tour even more confidence with this, big ratings. This was literally one of the most watched weekends in golf now in the entire last basically year and a half, right?
Yeah, since Tiger won this event back in 2000, it gained the most ratings on Sunday since then, which is just outstanding. A little bit can be pointed. There wasn't a ton going on in the world of sports on Sunday. There was no finals game. You know, the NHL game was late that night. So there wasn't really a ton going on, but still it's the largest, you know, ratings. And we'll see what comes from the US Open this week. But it's the largest ratings for a non-elevated event all season too. So just smash the numbers out of the park on CBS. So great job to CBS for holding a compelling broadcast as well. So pretty cool to see golf becoming more of a global game as we go along here.
Do we know how the numbers compared to the final round of the PGA in Rochester? Because that was one of the worst. And
I don't know.
At first glance, I believe this past weekend might have either rivaled or surpassed it, which to me,
if I had to guess, it probably did.
Which to me would just be a statement of a testament to the time of year.
Yes,
May is so difficult. And once you turn into June, things start to free up. You're not competing with hockey. You're not competing with basketball. And all of a sudden, you've got a lot more potential on TV, which I think is awesome for golf.
Agreed.
But talk about potential for golf this weekend, LA Country Club. Let's get into that, Nate. Give us the 411 on what we need to know about this golf course.
Yeah, LA Country Club, really, really looking forward to this event over there. 36 holes is on the property here. We're playing the North Course, first of all. So it's a par 70, 5 par 3s on this golf course. We'll talk a lot about the par 3s here coming up. 3 par 5s makes for a compelling golf course in my mind. Players really going to have to think about what their shots are. And it's pretty much in downtown Los Angeles, which is really cool, Josh. If you look at the map, it's like 5 or 6 miles away from the beach, which is funny because I was watching Golf Channel this morning and, you know, they're talking about how close it is to the beach, right? And it'll take you about 45 minutes to get to the beach, which just goes to a testament of the traffic and the population there, population density as well. Yeah. But just so cool. And it's so interesting. This course has never hosted a major, Josh. And if you have to go back in the record books to 1940, the last time that this golf course hosted a PGA Tour event.
Incredible.
It did have the Walker Cup just a few years ago, which is the lower ranked Ryder Cup kind of adjacent to that. So back in, I believe that was in 2018. So it has hosted sanctioned events, just not on the PGA Tour level. So going to be pretty awesome to get back to this. And lastly, too, just with it being in California, primetime golf, which is something that's really fun to watch. You know, you're taking a look at the tee times on Thursday, and they range from 9:45 a.m. on Eastern time to about 5:30 p.m. Yeah. So you're going to be watching golf up until about 10 o'clock, which is pretty cool for us people on the East Coast. I myself am a little bit more of a fan of the morning golf. I'm kind of a morning person, as I've been growing up in the golf world, kind of have brought me to that. But pretty cool to see golf on in those later windows too, because we just, quite frankly, don't see that a ton.
Yeah, and I think that's better for TV. Honestly,
yeah,
if we're talking about, you know, just practicality of getting the most eyeballs on those opening rounds, especially Thursday, Friday, later afternoon golf is great.
And the US Open does great with coverage too. On national TV, I think they have about 10 hours a day of coverage between the USA and NBC. And then they have more on Peacock too, which is pretty cool in the mornings as well. So they do a really good job of kind of showing their product too. So making it available for people to watch. I'll have my eyes glued to it. That's for sure.
And just I'll say it now, I'm sure we'll say it before the weekend is over. The PGA Tour really should take note of that and do that all year and try to do that as much as possible all year long, because you got to have it on TV. You can't just put it on at 3 p.m. and then scratch your head and ask yourself, well, gee, I don't know why nobody's watching.
Right. Or on a streaming service too. I think just putting it on the Golf Channel can really pay dividends as well.
So we're going to talk here in a minute about the setup, the U.S. Open setup here, what the USGA has done, what their intent was. Before we get into that, though, what do you think is going to be a winning score this weekend?
I think around 5 under. When we talk about the U.S. Open, we talk about, long rough, right? Long fairways too, as well. Places where guys are really going to struggle, and maybe the score could come over par in some U.S. Opens. You've seen that. But I think they'll play a little bit better on this course. As I've looked at it, I don't think that this course is crazy hard in terms of there's definitely some penal spots, but there's certainly some spots you can get to. Like the 6th is drivable. You have the par 3 15th, which is going to play under 100 yards. I believe they've talked about that on Saturday. It's going to play around 80 yards. Yeah. So that'll be some spots where players can really, really get to it. And I don't see these players struggling in terms of shooting over par in 4 consecutive rounds and being able to hoist the trophy. What are your thoughts there, Josh?
Yeah, you know what? I think it's a good spread. I think there's going to be. It's not a traditional setup, so that I think it's open enough so that scores can be posted. I'm sure the weather will cooperate.
It's going to make the golf course hard and fast too. I believe it's in the 70s. We're going to see a lot of sun. So
yeah. So I mean, it's LA. I could, I wouldn't be shocked. Look, if somebody told me that 9 or 10 or 11 under par won it, I wouldn't be shocked at this point. Wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, that might seem high, but we thought that, literally watching in person the PGA Championship, we thought that the winner would be a lot lower than what Brooks Koepka actually wound up sitting at.
Right. So, and they got so much rain too, and that softened up the golf course too. And the wind kind of died down on Sunday a little bit, in my opinion. So that made it a lot more gettable too.
Yeah.
It's just the matter of me where I agree with you, Josh, is that the fairways are really going to cake up, and they're already pretty hard too, especially even get harder. And these guys are going to be able to hit it down the fairway, and it's going to bound to some good numbers too. So length isn't going to be a huge deterrent in my mind, especially with so many par 3s as well too. You have some par 3s that are insanely long, and then you have some that are insanely short. You have a par 3 that measures up to 290 yards, which is just unfathomable, right? For the amateur golfer, especially. I would have to driver and probably play it as a par 4, right? So it's just really interesting to see. But yeah, I like that number, Josh.
Yeah. And I would also say this, like, these fairways visually are going to be a lot different than what most folks are used to. I think the narrowest fairways are around 42 or 43 yards, and the widest is about 72, 73. So, I mean, that is for US Open status, those are very wide fairways. So it's going to look different, and that's going to set things up. You mentioned the par 3s. I feel like this is an annual conversation. You're either talking about, par 3s that are set up very, very long, or you're talking about rough that is just set up exceptionally deep and thick. We've got both of those boxes checked off this weekend. Have US Open setups with some of the challenges that they lean into, whether it be really hard, fast, dried out greens, or, a par 3 that's going to play 290 yards, or perhaps rough that is, so deep and thick that when a golf ball rolls, 5 feet off the fairway, you can't see it anymore. Has that perhaps gone too far, or is it okay because we just don't see it that often?
Yeah, I think I'm in the middle kind of with this. I think hard is kind of a challenging word, right? Especially with the US Open. I think it can be kind of silly. Like a 290-yard par 3 is kind of not as fun, right? You're going to see a lot of threes. Not going to see guys hit it to 7-8 feet and make birdie. I mean, you're going to see that for sure, but there's going to be a lot of times where guys have 8-footers for par, and that's cool. It's golf's toughest test, right? The US Open. So the fact that we don't see it a lot is definitely good, and we see it once a year. But now we saw it at Oak Hill already with that one number 11 at Oak Hill was playing 270 into the wind, and that was playing like a ridiculously hard par 3. So maybe we're starting to see it a little bit more. So I think people can kind of get desensitized to it, and I don't really know if I like it or love it. I'm kind of in the middle on it, Josh, to really test these players as well. But you're just not going to see a lot of 2s. You're going to see some, but just not as many as you'd like to see on par 3s.
Yeah, sparing the whole debate or lecture around the golf ball. I think when it was new and when we first started to see lengthened par threes or par 3.5s, as a lot of people like to call them on social media, I think it was cool. It was neat. But now pretty much we're seeing them in every major, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe it's other than Augusta. We don't really see that happen at Augusta, but every other major we see that end up being a thing. And, when you see a number like 290 yards, that's just that it turns into like almost a caricature of itself. And you feel like it becomes less serious. Like it's almost an unserious par 3 because it's 290 yards long. Like by setting up a par 3 that long, what are you trying to prove? That like nobody can make, even the best golfers in the world will struggle to make pars on a long par 3. Well, yeah, if you're going to set it up almost 300 yards when the average carry distance on tour even now is like 303 yards, of course, like of course it's going to be like a very challenging golf hole. It loses over time. I feel like it's kind of lost its luster, and I think it would be best for everybody if the powers to be got a little more creative with how they're setting up par 3s, for example. Cause I like the idea of really growing out rough. I like it. I like when the greens are really dried out and, they're barely alive, and we're hearing players talk about, oh no, they're almost losing it. They're going to lose that one. I like hearing that part, but a par 3 is 290 yards. What are we doing? To me, it's silly. Yeah. How many questions do you think players are going to get this week, especially later today and tomorrow, about the Live PGA merger?
When I thought about this a couple of days ago, I said to myself, there's going to be like 50% chance that there's a lot of Live PGA Tour questions to these guys. And then I sat down and thought about it a little bit more. I dug a little bit deeper into it. Rory, Phil, Bryson, and there's a couple others of note too, aren't even having scheduled interviews at the US Open. So if Rory was doing a press conference, I can guarantee you there'd be a few questions about the merger. But with some of these other guys, I don't really think there will be. The other guys are really going to discount it and tell them that they're here to win a major championship. So I don't think we're going to hear a ton in terms of people asking and broadcasters asking the players if they're going to have or what they think about the merger. We will hear a lot of people talk about it throughout the broadcast the next 4 days. We'll hear, broadcasters talking to each other about it, asking questions and bringing in other people too, to kind of have their opinions on it and throw their thoughts out. So what do you think, Josh? Do you think players are going to be talking about it much, or do you think it kind of goes by the wayside for a week and we crown a champion and then we get talking about it more?
I think you're going to have certain players talking a lot about it. Namely, I think a guy like Phil Mickelson, he's gonna take probably every.
Will he take the Twitter, you think?
Every interview that he does after his round, someone will probably get asked, and he'll probably say something. If not, he'll probably find a way to say something, whether he tweets it like you just said, or whatever the case may be. I think a lot of these guys just don't really have any grand opinions on it. We won't get into it today, but there's been some interesting discussion and rumors on social about guys like John Rahm and Scotty Scheffler and what they may or may not think about this whole situation and Live. And, I think the timing of it, the announcement that is coming last week, early in the week, provided enough time between the announcement and this US Open that a lot of the initial questions that were getting thrown at players, last Tuesday and Wednesday are gone. They've worked themselves out. Bryson did his CNN interview. Guys have gone on national television, or they've gone on the podcast, or they've talked to whoever they need to talk to get their feelings out, the ones who want to. And I think most of the guys are just going to be, operating on the straight and narrow, focusing on winning. And, it's funny because a guy like Brooks Koepka, he had that viral tweet right after the announcement about Brandel Chambly. And, I'm sure there will be some folks who want to ask him about what he thinks about this situation now and where the two entities are going. But you know as well as I do that man is going to be focused on winning this golf tournament and not a damn thing else.
Oh yeah, I don't think he'll answer much in terms of that. It'll kind of be a next question approach for Brooks. Let's go back to a guy you just mentioned, Scottie Scheffler. We've talked about him a lot the last few weeks. His ball striking numbers have been just insane. It's come out that he's switching putters, which is a little bit interesting to me. You know, you always kind of wave a little bit of a flag when players, especially Scottie Scheffler's caliber, switch putters a week before a major, right? So what do you think about Scottie? And I know you know a little bit more about these putters too, Josh. So kind of take us through this change that the number one player in the world is going with.
So he's switched to what I believe is the Newport 2.0, a slightly wider version of the blade putter that he was playing with before. That's in simple terms. I'm sure there's some minor technical adjustments that the team at Scotty Cameron, Titleist, have gone through to make sure that putter is perfect for him. But I think the big thing is that this is the one hole in his game right now, putting.
It is. Oh my goodness.
And
definitely.
I think it would, what was it? 2 weeks ago, he lost something like 8 strokes to the field.
Yeah, he put in the best statistical approach to a golf tournament to not win pretty much in recent memory.
Yeah. So even if he, the takeaway from that was even if he played average, putted average, I should say,
missed the playoff by 1 stroke.
Yeah. So, this change, I think more than anything else, as is a lot of the time with putting, it's more mental than it is anything else. And sometimes the visual change, there's going to be a lot of talk about changing putters, but look, you and I have both played Scotty Cameron putters before. There isn't a tremendous feel difference between one Scotty blade and another Scotty blade.
Right.
They're notorious for providing basically the most equal feel and approach you could possibly get out of any putter. So I don't make as much a big deal about the technical specification of the change as I do about what this could potentially do for his mental to approaching putting. That's big.
Yeah, and I do find it interesting. We were talking a week ago, right, about Scotty's putting, and he had that press conference where he kind of was just like, well, I'll get through it. And you didn't really expect him to make an equipment change, right? So that's kind of why I'm kind of curious as to, Scotty's thoughts have kind of done a 180. He was kind of sitting there like, oh, I've been putting well and stroking the ball well. Just nothing's dropping for me, a little bit of that mantra. So it's just kind of interesting to me that Scotty's going to make this change, the week before the US Open. We'll see how it works out for him.
Yeah, but you know what? I think that's a good point, though, because sometimes that's what it takes. Like, you can feel good about your putting stroke. You can feel good about everything in your game around the green. But if you're going to change something to get some of those putts to start to drop, rather than go mechanical and start to actually change the way, maybe, there was some talk last week about maybe his face was a little closed with some of these putts that he wasn't necessarily given a chance a couple weeks ago. Rather than go mechanical, make the easiest switch first, which I think for them is equipment, just to go to a slightly different blade and, have 90% of the feel that he already had with just a little visual change. And who knows, it could be enough. If he went out and won this weekend, would we be surprised?
Definitely not. And you're a guy, Josh, that keeps about 5 or 6 putters in the trunk of his car and kind of held that mantra. So I'm gonna go with you on that one. Yeah.
Because it is sometimes it is the best way to just work yourself out of a putting funk, is to put something else in play, go out, tinker with it a little bit, and then it may be for no other purpose than to go back to your
you always go back. Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of times it is just to switch up the feel. Okay? Yeah. All right. It's time to get into our prospects for this weekend. US Open odds. Nate, what do we have for previewing our top players?
So the aforementioned Scottie Scheffler is the favorite in this event. To no one shock, right? Plus 700, 7-1 odds on the world number one. Rahm comes in at second at not plus 900. The last reigning major champion, Brooks Koepka, plus 1,100. Never going to get him at plus 2,000 again, Josh. I wish I put the 401k on him last time on that, but that's all right. Rory McIlroy 14-1 plus 1400, and Patrick Cantlay rounds out the top 5. He's also at 14-1 this week. Let's get into our picks, Josh. Who are you taking to win the 2023 U.S. Open?
You know what? I think I'm going to take Max Homa, and sitting at plus 2,500 on DraftKings. He is. I think a few months ago he was probably like the first guy everybody thought of to win this week. But I like to pick those guys that can fly under the radar on Thursday and Friday. All those names that you just mentioned, Scheffler, Rahm, Koepka, McIlroy, Cantlay, all eyes on them. And same goes for Victor Hovland, Tommy Fleetwood even, who's obviously Fleetwood's got longer odds, but all eyes are going to be on those guys because of how they've played in recent weeks. Whereas Max Homa, I think, can fly under the radar, and he's right there. He's got the game to win. We've seen him win in California recently. And yeah, that's where I'm sitting. What do you got?
I like a similar name. That's not my pick, but I like a similar name in that regard with Jordan Spieth. I think he's about that same number too. So I think he'll play well too as well. But my pick, I said it already, Jon Rahm at 9-1. I took him this morning. I had a real big debate between him and Scottie Scheffler, but I think I went with Rahm. He hasn't won since the Masters, Josh. We went on that crazy tear in the beginning of the season, but he hasn't played bad golf. In 3 events since in total, he's gotten 3 top 20s, including a second place finish in Mexico. I think Jon Rahm is going to play well this week, and I wouldn't be surprised if he hoists the trophy on Sunday. But it's hard to pick against a guy like Rahm. He's been really, really kind of, I don't know what the word is to say, but open about kind of how he's played. He's been really, dropping a couple different F-bombs. I heard a couple at PGA, and then I heard a couple at Memorial too. So a little bit of a flary Jon Rahm, right? It's a good Jon Rahm in my opinion. So I expect him to come out victorious this week.
See, to me, it's so interesting how different people can assess that differently, because to me, that's a signal that he has kind of gone off the rails from where we saw him a few months ago.
Yeah, but it's Jon Rahm, so it's a little different.
Yeah, I mean, he no doubt he's got the game. He can go out and play. But I think for U.S. Open, a guy like Scheffler, who 99% of the time plays within himself, has a far better chance of winning. When we look at long shots, who are you watching who has a little maybe longer odds this weekend?
So I said on the PGA Championship episode preview podcast, I said it was disrespectful that Justin Thomas is at 30-1. So what do they put him at 50-1? He's played not good golf, but he's a guy, Justin Thomas, a former major champion, a guy that I think if we're talking about hanging around, which is something you need to do with the U.S. Open, I think Justin Thomas can do that. He can make birdies in a flurry or play a different way around that too. So give me Justin Thomas 50-1 all day.
Yeah. I always put him and Jordan Spieth, and not just because of the relationship, but because of the way their games have kind of gone up and down, up and down, up and down over the years, in the same category. Like they could go out and win any weekend, major, elevated event, or anything in between, and nobody would be surprised. But my long shot pick this week is a guy who I have absolutely disrespected on this podcast before. And, at plus 4,000, Tony Finau is a pick, I think. He's a guy who tends, when he is playing well, he is a guy who, as I just said, plays within himself, doesn't really ebb and flow far to one extreme or the other, drives the ball well, hits irons well, manages the golf course that he's playing. And I think that's kind of what you're going to have to do this weekend. I think at plus 4,000, it's worth throwing a couple bucks on just to see what happens. Who knows? Maybe
he'll
win
to get your first major title. That's for sure.
It would be his first. And, I say this now and he could go out and miss the cut. Could happen. Talk a little bit about props. You are a prop man. So Nate, what do you have for us for props heading into this weekend?
Like the first 2 majors of the year, I should say. I'm going to have another make the cut parlay. I'm 1-1 this year, lost to the Masters, and then Denny McCarthy got up and down on 18 the PGA Championship to give me the win there. So we'll try to get another win on there. I'll have it out tomorrow. I'm still narrowing down a few people. So follow us on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter. I'll have it out there and ready for everybody. And then I have another fun little prop, hole-in-one in round 3, plus 900. And this is my thinking for it. Number 15, which is that shorter par 3. Yeah. On LA Country Club, plays his scorecard yardage about 125. It's rumored to play about 87 to 90 yards on Saturday. So players are going to have a lob wedge in their hands, and I think we have a chance to see a 1 on Saturday there. So only a little bit of sprinkle, plus at 9-1, just have a little bit of fun on Saturday when you're watching the U.S. Open. We'll see if one goes in.
And
then, Josh, the last prop I had, I didn't take it, but I saw it, and I wanted to get your opinion on it. It's will there be a playoff? As we've seen the last 3 tournaments with the Charles Schwab Memorial and now the Canadian Open last week all end in a playoff. I think it's around 3-1 on DraftKings. I was looking at it this morning. Do you think the U.S. Open will end in a playoff on Sunday?
No. I think the winner wins by more than 1 stroke.
More than 1. Okay.
So if there's a prop, I'm not a prop guy.
Is.
If there's a plus 2+ stroke differential between winner and second place, I would hop on that in a second because I think someone is going to stand out from the crowd. That someone could easily be Brooks Koepka, and if he wins by 2 strokes, you could be a couple bucks richer on DraftKings or FanDuel, right?
I'll look into that for you, Josh, and then I'll send it your way if I do see it.
All right, well, that is going to do it for this edition of Out of Bounds. We will be back after the U.S. Open to discuss our champion. Follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube for the latest golf news, new podcast episodes, giveaways, and plenty of other content. Remember, whether it's down the middle or out of bounds, keep on swinging.
You've been listening to Out of Bounds. If it's coverage, debate, or discussion of pro and local golf, we'll be talking about it. Be sure to visit the website. Find us on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. See you next time on Out of Bounds.